Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to Nerdtube and the Highly Illogical podcast. What are we doing here right now? Well, in the absence of any Trek, I'm trying to at least keep the Trek content rolling every Thursday so that we can have, so we're going to have this Highly Illogical podcast, which is something we've done on and off in the past. We always love talking about Trek. Today, I am joined by my friend and Trekkie in arms, Major Rage. How you doing?
Doing great. Excited to talk about this topic that we've kind of been going back and forth about and like fighting the urge to talk about during the reviews, basically all season. So it'll be nice to finally get all these ideas out there. And
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I'm definitely interested in what chat has to say about it as well. I can't wait to hear everybody's thoughts and opinions.
And that is right. And the topic we are talking about today is the first contact timeline. Now, this is everybody talks about the first the mirror timeline, the Kelvin timeline, the prime timeline. But there's a littler known theory out there. And as I said, I'm not the originator of this, but I do have my own thoughts on it. That there is another timeline out there, and it is called the first contact timeline. Whereas we all know the events of Star Trek First Contact. So we will start right. Well, first off, before we do that, Mage, before we get into like any details, like what are your thoughts on this timeline and things that we've kind of discussed in the past, about this idea?
I would say this is definitely a timeline that's in the mix there. Everything that has been produced since First Contact, I would argue, happens in this continuity, starting with Enterprise. The strongest piece of evidence I feel for this comes during Enterprise. We'll get into the particulars later, but more and more things keep cropping up as we keep plowing through new Trek content that just lend credence to this theory, and just minor differences between the prime timeline, and they just keep stacking up and becoming a greater and greater list. And any arguments against the First Contact timeline begin to hold less and less water as time goes by.
This is correct. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's like I came across this. Somebody, it wasn't even a video or anything. It was just a random thing on a random Facebook group that talked about this alternate timeline that started with First Contact. And so I'm like, that's a great idea. Then I was sitting there thinking, and I'm like, well, I mean, if they went back and they hit First Contact, and then we had Enterprise, and then Discovery, and then Strange New Worlds, currently, what, like, that would kind of explain a lot of the discrepancies. Now, we realize that this is all science fiction. We realize that this is all fake. There's going to be discrepancies even in the First Contact timeline, but we can always make educated guesses and educated inferences based on trends and, headcanon. So, don't sit here and think that we're saying this is the First Contact timeline. This is how it goes. Like, no, because there's going to be little bits here and there that are going to disprove everything, because continuity is a cunning bitch. Let's put it that way.
It really is. It's such a quagmire.
Yeah. So even J.R.R. Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien had a hard time keeping all of his continuity together, because there were several continuity errors, not major, but there were still some small continuity errors within his universe. And Tolkien has a pretty extensive continuity. I am now going to be introducing one of the best Star Trek fan film actors, producers, directors in history. He is the Stan Lee of fan films himself. It's the V-Man.
What's up, guys? How are we doing?
Hey, we're doing good. We just got done doing the introductions and everything of our topic we're talking about.
Good. Well, I got about 15 minutes or so before I got to head to work, but I figured I would drop by and say hello, guys.
Hey, it's always great to have you here, even if we get you for 15 minutes.
Thanks for joining us, V-Man. Love the TARDIS hat, by the way.
Oh, right on. Well, it's my pleasure. So we're discussing the Star Trek First Contact stuff, or okay, all right.
The First Contact timeline. So I'll run through the timeline really quick, and we'll get into details and thoughts and stuff like that. So basically, the first contact timeline is we have the prime timeline. Okay, the Borg go back in time. Picard follows them through the timeline or through the time portal. They stop the Borg from doing their thing, and then the Enterprise E beats feet back through the portal back into the 24th century. So my thought process on this whole thing is that when first contact happened, they blew up a Borg cube in Earth orbit, and a lot of people say, "Oh, well, that just was meant to happen." I don't think so. I think that what happened was, and as we see in Enterprise later on, is that there's an episode where they find remnants of that Borg cube, and as soon as that Borg cube came out of that portal, a new timeline started in first contact. And so from there, we now have, first contact happened, then Enterprise, then Discovery, and then Strange New Worlds. And I think all of these shows, because they are starkly different from the canon TOS, and I just got done explaining a little bit ago. We know this is science fiction. Like all of this is just us like inflating our own egos, thinking or at least that I'm smarter than I think. But
this is the grown-up equivalent of the kids around the lunch table discussing with their sack lunch, what's going on in sci-fi, but
Yep.
You're absolutely right. It's kind of like when you drop a rock in a pond and you see the ripples go out. Like, it may not affect a lot, but it affects something, because you got to think about some of those people may not have been super important in history, but eventually down the line, someone might be important to somewhere, something, so there are ripples all throughout time. So it had to have altered some things,
Mhm.
So yeah, it's altered to some point. It's not the same exact one. And I read an article just on the Klingon look, the difference between Discovery Klingons and Strange New World stuff, and I know they gave the excuse that, they shaved their hair during war, but I mean, it gave 3 different instances of wars that they were in. I think it was the Dominion War, and like 2 other wars that we were in, that the Klingons had hair. So it was like, that doesn't make sense, but just the ripple stuff throughout time where it's like, this is clearly something's off here, and for most of us Trek fans who have, common sense, we can easily go, it's fine, and we go on about with the story and we don't mind. But to those hardcore, old Trek fans who are like, no, it's got to make complete sense with the old cardboard sets from TOS, they have a hard time getting past those things. But that's kind of the fun of thinking about, well, maybe it's slightly altered from something in the deep past. And that's why Picard season 3 was so much fun, is because he pulled on some of those strings and played with them in ways that none of us even thought about,
Yep. Well, and that's as I said, we've, as a society, like as a nerd and science society, we've come to a point where multiverse is just kind of like if honestly, I would say as few as 10 years ago, if you went to somebody and said, hey, you want to hear about the multiverse theory, they would have no idea. A lot of people would have no idea unless they were like comic book readers, or even, some Trekkies. Some Trekkies would probably know. Now the multiverse is just a thing that everybody knows about. Yeah, the multiverse, it's infinite diversity through infinite combinations. It is what it is. And it's just like that's kind of where we're at, is like, how many different Trek timelines are there? We don't really know at this point.
Well, if you go back to the episode, just go back to our, in our generation, the episode Parallels, in Next Generation, season 7, is the latter part of season 7, the episode Parallels, where Data says there's a relatively new theory in quantum mechanics where there's that multiverse, and they actually demonstrate how one and it just kind of pings off into the multiverse, you know, and that was what, 35 years ago, you know, and just in that mentality, it's become now socially acceptable for multiverse stuff. Where when we were a kid, like just thinking of, oh, a mirror universe was just so out of the norm, you know. So what we've come to just think of is, oh, it's just another timeline. Who cares, you know? Think of Spider-Man in your language, Spider-Man. You know, all the different Spider-Man in movies. It's just like, people accept it and they move on. You know, Trek fans are not so easily moved by just accepting it and going on. You know, so
yeah. So I'm going to get to a couple of comments. We had some of them building up here, and I apologize, but so Daniel Vance said before the program started, he said, timeline? This is no time to talk about time. We don't have the time. What was I saying? Daniel Vance also said, Starfleet Temporal Mechanics 101 class about to begin. That was right before the begin. Jim Landscape says hello and hail Daniel Vance. Daniel Vance says cheers and to everybody. And hopefully, I hope you're doing well. Jim says, got rained out and editing some videos. Oh, I know all too well about editing those videos. Zam tells me to change your name, you plagiarist, which I changed it to plagiarist. Jim says, yeah. Okay, so now we get in the meat and potatoes. Daniel Vance says, first contact is a casual loop paradox, more specifically a predestination paradox. I don't necessarily agree. Predestination paradoxes, amazingly enough, got their name from DS9 Trial and Tribulations. But okay, we'll get into that in a minute. Let me get through these comments here. It's all the Borg's fault. It is. V-Man in the house. He is not. He is in the car. Mr. V-Man.
That's right. Put some respect on it.
Daniel Vance says the events of Enterprise regeneration, which we will get into here in a little bit, where they find two frozen Borg in the ships from First Contact, confirm that the prime timeline was altered, not changed. Okay, wait.
That's semantics right there. That is a highly semantic argument, Daniel Vance.
So, my thoughts on this, like you were saying, is like we're just sitting around the lunch table talking about nerd theories. But that is like everyone wants an explanation as to, well, why Strange New Worlds look so much better than the original TOS, blah, 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 you know? And it's like, you can either accept it for what it is. It is a show that was made 60 years later and has a much, I mean, they obviously honor the old with, you know, just little bobs and knickers and stuff like that around the thing. But we just have to accept the fact that it's 60 years ago that this happened. And this is the prequel problem. Or we can just go with, this is a different timeline. And which I'm more apt to, because there's an actual somewhat explanation to it, where we have, you know, the timeline diverged a bit at First Contact. And then we get into Enterprise, where we do have the episode Regeneration. Also, there was an episode in Enterprise that I wanted to bring up where Archer is discussing or is reading a speech from Zephram Cochrane, where he does describe the events of First Contact.
That's in Regeneration.
Was that in Regeneration also? Yes. Okay.
But that's an important scene to discuss. That's part of our key evidence, I would argue.
So I feel like that is also a key evidence to the fact that this is a different timeline, because this is nowhere mentioned ever again that this happened in this speech. And I get it. TNG happened before Enterprise. So is it retcon? Absolutely. I mean, I'm not stupid, but you know, is it better to say it's a different timeline, or is it better to say, oh, this is a prime timeline? It should, you know?
The one thing that I think really hurt and this could be delving into a completely different argument. I think one of the things that really sucked was the fact that they always wanted to, hey, let's connect this dot with this dot, and let's connect this with this. Like they wanted that message from the Borg, that was the team from the planet, that, you know, they wanted that message to be sent out, and then Archer go, oh, it's going to take about 200 years for them to reach the Delta Quadrant. Like, they always were trying to connect certain dots. And to me, I the only thing I think that kind of helped was maybe Annika's parents. It kind of explains why they would know about the Borg. Maybe outside that, it's like I don't feel like that was needed. I always enjoyed the fact that, hey, there's this mysterious race that's on the neutral zone that's kind of just scooping up these. I don't feel like if you really sent that message off 200 years ago, they'd be on Earth's fucking doorstep and they'd be fucking us up. I don't think we really needed that, and I feel. Again, this is an argument for a different time. I don't feel like we always needed to connect all of these dots in prequel shows. I feel like if you're going to do a prequel, like tell a show about the Gorn, which Strange New Worlds is doing. I'm glad that there's no sign of Borg in Strange New Worlds. I think that would probably be the only thing that would make me check out, because it's like, look, as much as I like the Borg, we've had 3 seasons of Borg in Star Trek Picard. Granted, each one it was done completely different, but if we were to do the Borg in another prequel show, fucking stop,
I mean, I don't mind the Borg showing up in like the 25th century, like where if we see the Girardi Borg again,
right,
not as a villain, but like as just something that's out there, because no matter how much we hate the Girardi Borg idea, which I do, I think it's I think they should have ended the Borg at season 3 but now we've got the Girardi Borg out there from season 2, and it's like, I really feel like that, I don't like the idea of there being a sect of Borg out there that are just like, hey, we love peace. We will. Would you like to be? I want an episode of Lower Decks where it's like we travel to the future and they see like the whole like tents where they're like recruiting. I want Girardi Borg to be there, like at a tent, like trying to recruit. Would you like to be assimilated? Think about having a hive mind.
But
it's like the Borg. It's like
clothes.
It's like the Borg. Yeah, the Borg meets Woodstock. I think. I think in my mind, a version of that done right was the new cooperative, which was in Voyager season, I think 3, right before they actually, and I think that was that was done right, because we weren't overexposed to the Borg, and it was an original idea, but now it's just been played out and so much, and especially in the prequel shows, just fucking leave it alone. But again, that's an argument for a different time, yeah. Anyway, but I gotta head out, guys. I gotta get to work. So, but thank you for having me on. It was wonderful chatting with you guys. We got to do this again. So,
absolutely love having you. Your celebrity check is in the mail.
Right. Well, yes. All right.
Welcome anytime, sir. Have a great evening.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye.
Later. All right, so Mage. So I mean, we did already. Let's kind of continue on the Enterprise trend where we're at. I mean, do you have any thoughts leading up to what we've been talking about so far? Go ahead and go hog wild on it. Just probably don't go past Enterprise at this point. We'll kind of do checkpoints per show.
Sounds good. I'd like to go back and touch on that Zefram Cochrane speech a little bit.
Okay.
The fact that there's mention of the Borg in the historical record. This directly contradicts what Q told Picard when he first flung them to the Delta Quadrant and caused them to encounter the Borg. He tells them that they weren't going to encounter them for another long period of time. I don't remember the exact number Q lists, but they still weren't going to encounter the Borg until that event happened. Q is a notorious liar, but he has nothing to gain from lying right now and telling Picard this if humans had actually already encountered Borg at the events of First Contact.
Let me just is Q really a liar though? Like, I don't feel like he's a liar. I feel like he spins a web, and I feel like he says, I mean, it depends on if you he says he leaves out information. So he says half truths. So, I mean, I guess if you want to consider that a lie, you are correct. But I've never thought of Q as a liar. He's just always been a trickster. He plays on words. Your
description's more apt. It's a better description.
So I mean, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I just have never really thought about it. So
you definitely have to take what he says with a grain of salt, but he has nothing to gain from altering the truth any right here to taunt Jean-Luc. He has nothing to gain in that moment from doing that.
Okay, I'm just gonna hit a couple comments on here. I don't know why this thing didn't update right. And so anyway, okay, so here's a couple comments. Wow, I think the devil's advocate. Wait, wow, I think I'm the devil's advocate in this discussion. You know what, Daniel Vance, you can be the devil on my shoulder any day. Zam says, I am curious regarding the timeline, but I am getting close to not giving a fuck. Well, you know, Zam's gonna Zam. Jim says, yeah. Don't know what that's yaing for, but yeah. Daniel Vance says, if there had been no evidence left behind in First Contact, we'd be dealing with a self-sufficient loop. That is, well, yeah. I mean, but they found the evidence in Enterprise. And it was never mentioned again. There was no mention of this technology. They even, when they encountered the Borg after all the scans, there was no mention of any, like, hey, we found something similar. Like, we found technology similar to this in the Arctic on Earth back in 21 something.
2152.
2150, right around there. It's like season 2. So yeah. So I'm sorry, like, this was post World War III, because if this happened before World War III, I could say, okay, information got lost in World War III, but it didn't. Like, it even in the eugenics wars, it didn't. It happened post Warp 5 travel. So obviously, and there's not been anything that is really just like not corrupted, what's the word I'm looking for, decimated the Earth since World War III in any of the Star Trek timeline, really.
Historical records intact from that point forward.
Yeah. So I mean, unless somebody just accidentally deleted the file, okay, so Dana Vance also says the events of First Contact were covered up by the prime time in the prime timeline. The subsequent events still unfolded as they should, but yet Zephram Cochrane was mentioning it in a speech right in front of, what was it, a graduating class at Starfleet Academy or at some place. So not very covered up, I mean, and Archer had access to that. Cheers, V-Man. So everybody's saying bye to V-Man. Zam says, nice insight. Likes, please. Yes, everyone, please give a like if you like our theory. If you like this discussion, please leave a like. It helps the analytics. Okay, so Dana Vance says, governments classify information all the time with varying levels of security clearance. They need events to play out the same, else they know they change the timeline. And again, you are correct, but sorry. And Dana Vance said, one more message. Zephram was a known drunk, but I don't think he was a known drunk after the events of First Contact. I think he sobered up, wasn't he? I think he was pretty respectable at that point, and not like he kind of left his Kardashian days behind him.
That was like one of those to Paul arguments. She was on the fence about it because, of course it was involving time travel and stuff, and she was always on the fence about that. That was one of those to Paul dismissing it, brushing it away moments, I feel like. It's like, oh, he's just some drunk human. Can't trust what he said.
Yeah. So okay, so I'm sorry, Mage. Go back onto Enterprise. I mean, I do the episode. Now let's keep in mind: would this be a lot cleaner if the episode regeneration never happened? Yes. However, it's not clean, and Star Trek has never been clean. There's always been continuity errors, and so I mean, there's so many continuity errors probably in TOS that you could say that certain episodes of TOS are not even a part of the prime timeline sometimes, and I don't have any references for that, but it's just a fact is that
it's pretty common knowledge that the star dates were all over the place in TOS. They didn't have like a convention, like a rules for how star dates worked like they came up with in TNG.
Yep. So I mean, with the whole Enterprise argument, and also why the technology looks different. You know what I mean? Like, there comes a point where you suspend disbelief, and it's like, well, it's either this or this, and you can either suspend disbelief or you can say, that's a good enough in canon reason. So I mean, then we kind of move on to Discovery, where we have things looking a bit more technologically advanced. And so I feel like that this is an exact response to the scans that they had from the Borg and from other things. Is it a minor change? Absolutely, it is a minor change. But you know what? They got scans of 24th century Borg technology. Now they may not have been able to like decipher it or decrypt it, but like there was salvage left over from that ship. I don't think it like vaporized. So there was still, and let's go with the Daniel Vance cover up thing. Section 31 existed. So who's to say they did not get their hands on that Borg technology? And from that day forward in Enterprise, the timeline changed because they got that Borg technology, Section 31 did, and they were feeding it to Starfleet, like Starfleet Defense or Starfleet, R&D.
Yep, and they reverse engineer it, start implementing it into Starfleet ships, and we end up with a technological level much advanced, thanks to them gaining access to, 200-year in the future technology.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm sure they didn't get that much from it, I'm sure they didn't get that much from just that wreckage, but they got something. And I think that was enough to change some of the aesthetics of some of these ships, some of, some of the different procedures and stuff like that when it comes to, like finding new technology and stuff. Sorry, I was reading Daniel Vance's message here. The upgraded technology comes from their knowledge of a more warlike mirror universe. They didn't know about the mirror universe in Enterprise? Are we talking about Discovery? Because
they already had the tech.
Yeah, they already had the tech. They didn't really have. I mean, they did find out about the mirror universe in Discovery when the whole Lorca thing happened, I believe.
Mm-hmm. The crew of Disco knows about it before they have the transporter malfunction, and Spock learns about it in the TOS.
Yeah, because Discovery takes place before TOS. So technically, the whole mirror universe thing happened. Technically.
Well, Kirk learned about it first. I'm sorry. He's the one that was flung there.
Yeah, but still. Disco takes place 10 years before TOS. So, I mean, technically that technology would be or that knowledge would not be there until Disco episode 8 or whatever the one happens where they accidentally flip into when they transport into the mirror universe in Disco. So yeah, I mean, with Disco, it's just like, Section 31 is also it seems like Section 31 is more heavily involved in what's going on, because I went back recently and watched some of season 1 of Disco. I'm still working my way through it. But Section 31 seemed to be more out and about and they kind of seem to be a little bit more common knowledge than, in Disco than they were in anything until they were discovered up in like DS9. And I think that also is a change, because as we were talking about with the Borg technology, I think Section 31 was able to get more power and more influence because of, like, as I said, they knew they were probably dealing with future tech in Enterprise. So, when they researched whatever was left of that Borg ship that they encountered. So obviously obviously Section 31 would have been more involved with that. So,
having an outside threat that they know about, like, some higher ups in Starfleet are, despite, they probably kept it quiet about this Borg incident in the 22nd century, but Starfleet knows about it. And saber rattlers like Section 31 and other government agencies like that tend to get a lot more leeway, funding, etc., when there's some sort of outside threat that will galvanize a government to empower them like that.
So galvanize, good word.
So between that, giving them more power and authority, and just being able to flex their might a little bit, bringing in this tech and starting to reverse engineer it would give them some sway. They could talk to members of government, like, look at what we're doing, you might want to keep us around, you might want to help me out, I'll keep helping you out, sort of things, under your underhanded politics. Yeah. But I would see that, that seems like a pretty big difference.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, if they just called Disco Season 1 Star Trek Section 31, like on the ship of on the Section 31 ship of the Discovery, I feel like it would have been a much more well-received story, I think, because it was definitely more of an indicative Section 31 show. After watching season 1 again, it's like there's so much Section 31 stuff here. It's like it should have just been a Section 31 ship. Black
It's
Ops.
that would be much more interesting, because a ship with a different type of mission, you would expect the tone to be different. You would expect the content to be different. It was billed as, a normal Star Trek series, and then it was
not.
It was not. It was vastly different and left such a sour taste in so many fans' mouths. But I'm getting on a tangent here.
Yeah, we are. It's okay. You know what? It's okay. I mean, tangents aren't bad as long as we come back around. So that the Highly Logical podcast is kind of like our Friday podcast, just Trek related. We kind of start on a topic and we kind of talk about it, and then we kind of, I am going to bring up a comment here from the LTD or TLD. Sorry. I'm sorry to say this, but we may have to use TOS timeline loosely. I 100% agree. And we may have to start a TNG forward. And again, I agree. Zam agrees as well. TOS has got a lot of problems. And again, it is a 60-year-old show. It came out in the 60s. It was the beginning of something that didn't know what it had back then. And that's fine. You kind of have to honor it, but not really live by it.
Viewers didn't have such high expectations of tight continuity in their shows yet. Science fiction had existed in serial format. The story kept, it was self-contained stories told over multiple episodes. Star Trek fans almost seem to have invented the idea of keeping track of a strict canon and continuity and stuff like that. It seems like that's an invention of those hardcore classic Trekkers and Trekkies, and bless them for it. Canon might be a quagmire of a discussion, but it's a hell of a fun one to have most of the time. So thanks to any classic Trekkies out there for getting the ball rolling on this discussion.
Zam says, I think there are subtle changes to the timeline. Did I miss something here? No. Many things will follow suit, but there will be minor changes here and there. You are correct. All right, Daniel Vance. Let's see. We also know there are temporal changes protecting the prime timeline. They really need a temporal Cold War movie to wrap up loose threads. I mean, yeah. I think the temporal Cold War. Honestly, yeah, we do need a movie, but as I said, I don't think the temporal Cold War has anything to do with the prime timeline. I think the temporal Cold War was introduced in Enterprise, and I feel like that is a different timeline. So there is no ever mention of a temporal. Well, I mean, there's obviously the temporal accords and stuff like that, and the temporal prime directive in Voyager, but there's never a mention of a temporal Cold War. Now, maybe they were just protecting future knowledge that they didn't need to give out. That's one of this is one of those things that we have to infer and use our best guess. He says Gary 7 was totally a temporal agent. Yes, he was. I mean, yeah, just for lack of a title, but yes, he was. But yeah, so the Discovery thing is, I feel like a lot of the changes in Discovery are what really. And I don't think, I mean, unless you have any other points to bring up about Discovery, I think Discovery does in and of itself. And on top of that, going to the mirror universe in season 1 in Discovery, like it kind of does blow the prime timeline out of the water that whole surprise of Kirk going to the prime timeline or to the mirror universe and the mirror universe in TOS. And as I said, again, came out in the 60s, so real life is, yes, it is a retcon, but for us, it's like, if Enterprise is in a separate or if Discovery is in a separate timeline, that means that they didn't have to go the events of Section 31 being more involved with like Spore Drive and stuff like that. That's why Spore Drive is probably not in Voyager. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's probably the fact that Section 31, maybe even something with that Borg technology led into the research of some kind of spore travel. Like that's a weave that could go, like that could have spread pretty far, because the time frame from Discovery, or from Enterprise to Discovery, or even First Contact, was like 150 years. From First Contact to Discovery, right? 150 years.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Or 175, something like that. So that's why in the Prime timeline they discovered the mirror universe prior to Kirk actually discovering it in the Prime timeline. Because honestly, at this point, they just need to come out with it. They just need to come out with it and say, look, all this new Trek that takes place, like back before, back before the end of Nemesis, like all of this stuff that's a prequel and everything like that, it's all a new timeline. Like, let's the whole chapel and spot. Well, we're gonna get it in Strange New Worlds here in a second, but
it would give the writers an out with some of the more rabid fans that are more worried about continuity and can't set aside their willful suspension of disbelief as well.
Even though we have a good excuse, the multiverse is a thing. It is a well-known fact. It's not like it's like, and this is what Discovery, because the writers of season one of Discovery basically came and said, oh, this is Discovery takes place in the Prime timeline. Like, why would you say that? Like, when your show is so starkly different. You know what I mean? There are fan films like our friends over in the Avalon universe and over in No Budget Productions and in Film Fair. All those shows, or all of those fan films, probably take place in the Prime timeline more so than current Trek, New Trek, Discovery, and Strange New Worlds and stuff like that. So, anyway, anything else to talk about on Discovery before we move on to Strange New Worlds? Or
I think I don't have anything else to add about Discovery. There doesn't seem to be as many like specific things we can cite in it, but just the overall level of technology and type of events would lend credence to the theory.
Okay, so Gary 7. Okay, Boss Man Gary is also a temporal agent. Yep, he is from the future. That is why he knows that Nerdtube is going to be the greatest YouTube channel you've ever heard of, and not never heard of.
Well, yeah, that's why they should subscribe to it.
That's right. That's absolutely why they should. Section 31 will show could wrap it all up. You are correct. A Section 31 movie would probably be. I mean, they have one. There's one on the books. It's with Michelle Yeoh. Like, they've already announced it, so it's going to be a movie. Which I think that's just because they didn't want to pay Michelle Yeoh to do a whole show, which is fine with me.
I don't think they could get her consistently enough
to do a show.
Do a show, yeah.
No, she's on fire right now. Which
yeah,
she deserves it. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, she's usually the best part of any given Disco episode if she's on it.
Absolutely. Strange New Worlds establishes a new timeline in season 1 that was confirmed by the writers. If you have a specific instance, let me know. I'm sure there is, and I'm sure I'm forgetting it. But
I guess the difference could be Pike having that knowledge of his future.
Yeah, but that actually happened in Disco.
That started then. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, I mean, you can be right about. I mean, that is another thing that it's like, hey, it's different. You know what I mean? Like,
that would be like the one specific. If we're gonna rewind a little bit and talk about Disco, I'd say that's like the one specific, like, big difference. Like, that totally. It flips the script on, the Cage, and, the original pilot of TOS. It just, like, flips the script of 180 on its head.
And it's not even like nobody knows about it. Like, even Una knows about his future incident. You know what I mean? And she's mentioned it several times in Strange New Worlds about what's going to happen to him. I love how they're trying to play with it being canon, because, like, well, I just accept it. I accept my fate. And that's why this is going to be, canon, because Pike accepted his fate long before the events of the Cage actually happened, or not the Cage, but you know what I mean? The
accident itself.
Yeah, the accident itself. So I still, that's why I'm like, no, honestly, if it got to the point where, and I wouldn't mind them doing the changeover in Strange New Worlds with Kirk taking over for Pike and just not the accident happening. Maybe him, Pike going off and riding off into the sunset, but knowing that he's supposed to be gone at that point. Maybe, something happens, the accident doesn't happen, but he decides to go off and do his own thing because he knows that he's supposed to be gone, at least so he doesn't mess up the timeline too bad. And then Kirk comes in. I don't mind that. But at the same time, yeah, like in Disco, where he knows that incident's going to happen, is another huge, I don't believe he accepts his fate. You know what I mean?
The human instinct to survive is just too strong. And even if he knows he's going to technically be alive, what kind of existence is it? Definitely not one that to be envied.
Daniel Vance brings up Goldsman in response to Strange New World timeline when asked in season 2 stated,
nice.
This is a correction because otherwise it's silly or Star Trek ceases to be in our universe. By the way, this happened in season 1. So this is not a season 2 issue. It's a plot issue. We want Star Trek to be a aspirational future.
Okay. Yes, that's the goal of Star Trek, is to inspire hope in us and show that it is possible for the future to be better, but just to go, it still is technically our future. It diverged later on. So, even if it is a first contact timeline, that's still an extension of our own, and we still have, can be inspired by the fact that, it is possible maybe one day, we can be the best versions of ourselves and get rid of scarcity and bigotry and all the other societal ills that the show has been trying to tell us about for over 60 years.
He also says they put the eugenics wars and World War III in season 1, or they put off I don't think they put off World War III. I think World War III still supposed to happen. I mean, we haven't hit that in the real life timeline of us. So I think they still have the eugenics wars as happening in the 2350s. Or not 2050s, right? 2050s, 2040s.
I thought the eugenics wars were in the late 90s.
No, I'm talking about World War III.
Oh, yeah, that would be, yeah.
No, the eugenics wars was in the 90s. And so that does bring up the next conversation of topic is, yes, the eugenics wars. So in a recent episode of Strange New Worlds, where our friend La'an Noonien Singh goes back in time with an alternate version of James Kirk, they come to a point where, and it's clearly the 20 something set, like the 2020s or 20, even if it's like 2015, 20, it's still way past the 90s. Then by the end of the episode, you see Khan Noonien Singh, and he's a child. So one of two things is happening here. The timeline's changed, or someone has, and actually I think La'an even said there was no discrepancy. She didn't even say anything like, wait a minute, why. No,
it was different. Like, she gets there on that Enterprise and things are so different. Like, it's not a Federation ship. There is no Federation in that alternate universe she gets taken to.
Yeah, but she did not mention any difference with the Khan thing because...
Oh, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, Khan was a kid. It was clearly in the 2000s, sometime in the 2000s.
And she would be like, my ancestor wasn't a child at this time.
Exactly. Yeah. And she would know that Khan was not. So there's obviously some time travel shenanigans going on there. So, I mean, you could say that that's actually another branch of a timeline that's a change, because if you think about it, even in our theory of the first contact timeline, things don't change until the 2260s or 2060s. Oh, God, I keep saying 2060s. So technically that is a whole, like, if that's a change, that's a Strange New Worlds. What was that episode called? That's called the Tomorrow Timeline, because technically that somehow that changed. You know what I mean? Like, so that's a whole different thing.
they're choosing to involve elements of the eugenics wars in their plot, constantly making these references to Khan. It would. It absolutely has to be a separate timeline if they're going to, not make things line up like they were supposed to. I mean, it's not like the writers of Strange New Worlds are obviously much more familiar with the source material than the people who started the initial seasons of Discovery. They're a lot more reverential towards it. And these people know when the eugenics wars would have happened. If they didn't know, they would go back and look it up because they actually care to take the time and effort for us. So it's an interesting choice, and I don't see what it accomplishes other than trying to give us those warm fuzzies, like was said in the quote that Daniel Vance gave us.
Yep. Okay, so I was actually trying to look something up while you were talking, but
I'm sorry, I should have went longer.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I was trying to look something up, and I wanted to, before I said out of turn, because obviously we're deep diving here. So even in the First Contact realm of the First Contact timeline, we're out of our depths. So the one thing I wanted to bring up is in Picard season 2, Noonien Eric Soon, right? Is it Eric or is it? I don't remember which Soon it is. Eric, Aaron, Asbestos, Noonien Singh. I don't.
Right.
Or not Noonien Singh. Sorry, Soong.
Soong.
Sorry.
Oh my god.
So close in names. It's so annoying.
I don't know why they didn't go. This sounds an awful lot like a plot, like a name that's huge in our continuity. Maybe we should make it a little bit different. But then again, that just gets me on the whole thing of why do we need so many damn ancestors of the positronic Singh?
Yeah.
Or Soong, like why? How many times do we have to drag Brent Spiner back out here to play his ancestor? He did it great in Enterprise. Just leave it alone. You don't got to beat that dead horse. They did it twice in Picard. They did it twice.
Yeah, but I still love Brent Spiner, and the thing is I didn't want him back as Data. I never wanted him back as Data. I wouldn't have minded him back as Lore, which he kind of was, but I kind of wish it would have been Lore in season 3. Anyway, that's a tangent for another day.
I could gripe about that all day. So let's not start with that. I could gripe about that all day and all night.
So one of my points that I'm going to make here is that let's go to Picard season 2 at the end. Okay, Picard. Okay. It's Picard. The show has always had its issues. Even season 3, there were some issues. I know, Mage, you were far less of a fan of it than even me and Zam. And I mean, I still had my criticisms of it. Zam cried like a baby for most of it because he's a little bitch sometimes. But I mean, but
I tried so hard to like it. I went in all full of hopium. I was so excited. I wanted to see the reunion, and it just.
Yeah, bottomed out.
It bottomed out. It was not handled well. It was pandering for pandering's sake, and
there was a lot of pandering for pandering's sake. Absolutely, I agree with you. Okay, but my point of bringing up season 2 of Picard is at the very end of the season, whichever Soon was. I don't remember his first name. Eric, Aaron, Asbestos, Soon.
Eric Andre.
Eric Andre, yeah. AA Ron Soon. Who knows? He pulls a folder out of his file, and I don't remember. I was trying to look up if there was a date on the folder, but it's clearly a folder that's already been established. And okay, so Star Trek Picard takes place in 2025, I believe, or 2024, maybe 2024. And that folder looks like it's aged quite a bit. So that means that's also proof that the Picard, like the seasons of Picard, still take place in the prime timeline, because the
Project Con confidential funding report June 7th, 1996 is what is printed on that folder.
So further states my point is that there's obviously some differences here with the timeline, because even in the episode of Strange New Worlds, Tomorrow and Tomorrow, the timeline technically didn't change until the explosion happened on the bridge, right? Like that was the inciting moment where the timeline varied in that episode, where it was supposed to become, there was no Federation, there, all this other stuff. That wasn't that was one of the inciting incidents, because remember that explosion never happened in La'an's history, but they were able to course correct it by the time, by the time they got to the Khan thing. So Khan was a child in that, but is clearly not the 90s. So these are obviously two separate timelines, where Picard season 2 takes place in the prime, like all of the Picard stuff takes place in the prime timeline, because obviously Soon had the Project Khan and it was already done and over with. That's when Soon started his research into eugenics. So but that's why I'm saying is that, but in Strange New Worlds, Khan was already born, or Khan was a child, not already done. So, as I said, is it all just continuity spaghetti? Probably. Are we reading too much into it? Probably. But is it fun to sit here and break it apart and dissect it?
Absolutely.
So yeah. So I don't know, Mage, what do you think? I mean,
that episode's got a lot of problems, and there's an awful lot of vagaries in it. They were very afraid to be super specific because they didn't want to back themselves into that canon corner, but they know what Trekkies are like. They opened a can of worms without they opened a can of worms without leaving them live, so it can be proper gawk.
Yeah,
it's a can of dead worms that would piss off any Klingon, and I would have just avoided it if I were them. I don't think they told a particularly compelling story with that episode, and I think the way they're handling that part of Lon's character development, I don't know, it seems too old-fashioned, to write, this badass, strong female character who is now, all lovey-dovey over Jim Kirk, a la the 60s. And it seems incongruous with what we've been presented with for La'an so far.
I kind of disagree with you, only because, and I'm not trying to commentate on women here, but like a lot of times strong female people, like female characters, like human, like real life people, they are strong, but they also love strong.
They're very passionate people.
Yeah. So I mean, when they fall, like they can fall fast. I've seen it happen. So I mean, I don't feel like it's outside the realm of La'an's personality for her to fall for Kirk that fast and that hard, because it does that is how a lot of like strong female personalities work that I've experienced. Not all females are the same. I'm not saying that women are this. No, Mage, stop it. No, stop writing your post that I'm sexist. Anyway.
No, man, I gotta stir the pot.
Cheeto is sexist.
Cheeto's sexist. Mage is a racist. Zam's just a cunt.
Yeah, right. There we go. I mean, we got it. That's our slogan. It's like if
I hope Zam's still here.
Yeah, I hope Zam is still here. Okay, so Daniel Vance, or I'm sorry, the TLD has a comment here. It says maybe they went to the mirror universe in Strange New Worlds. I think he's talking about that episode. And then Daniel Vance also says 1996, the same year Star Trek inspired the naming of the predestination paradox, a bullet point under the heading of casual loop paradox. So, yeah. So I think me and Mage have kind of talked this topic to death. I think we need to get another opinion in here. So allow me to welcome to the. Do you have anything else before I welcome our guest on here, Mage?
Not at all. I think that everybody's heard about as much of me as they can stomach for right now. Let's get another opinion.
Oh, and he disappeared. I hope he'll be back. It was Mr. Harris. I don't. His name was Harry Harris on there. I don't know if he wants me
nickname.
I don't know if I want to give out his full name. I don't remember if he's okay with that or not. But he dropped out for a second, so we will see. We'll see if he comes back. So anyway, I don't know. I mean, Mage, what do you think, man? I mean, like, we've kind of dissected this to death. We've kind of, like pulled it apart and made it, all even more convoluted than when we started. What are your thoughts
I
on,
mean,
like the thing as a whole?
I feel like it's the best explanation we can come up with as overthinking fans as to the slight differences between what was presented to us in the past and what was presented to us following the First Contact movie. I feel like we've presented a lot of good evidence for it. I feel like Daniel Vance has made some really good arguments as a devil's advocate for it, but but some of them are very semantical. And some of them just kind of feed into what we were trying to say, and maybe we didn't phrase it exactly correct.
Oh yeah, I'm all over the place. I'm terrible with wording. I mean, you know me. I'll make anything confusing.
I don't think you're nearly as bad as all that, but everybody misspeaks and fumbles and doesn't fully articulate what's going through those spaghetti brains of ours.
Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts on the topic?
No, not in particularly. I mean, I've kind of given all my final thoughts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in Harry Harris for a minute. Mage, I know that, if you need to go, then
Nope,
that's
good.
Okay. So I'm going to bring in Harry Harris here. Harry, how you doing, my friend?
Not too bad. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you perfect, actually.
Loud and clear, sir.
Cool. Excellent.
So,
Well,
are you familiar
good to
with...
see you guys. Sorry.
Oh, good to see you too. So are you familiar with the First Contact timeline theory?
Not exactly.
Okay. So
go ahead and fill me in real quick.
Okay. Because we just kind of ran through all of it. So I mean, I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version, and you can kind of give your thoughts. So what we think with the First Contact timeline is that in the movie First Contact, the Enterprise goes back in time, destroys a Borg cube. All right. They stop the Borg. They go back to their timeline through the portal back through time. All right. So then they go back to the canon timeline. So what we're saying is that the First Contact timeline is actually a separate timeline from the canon timeline after that point in that timeline. So in Enterprise, when they find the Borg in the Arctic, that is a variant from, in our opinion, that is a variant from the canon timeline, because there's no mention of this ever again in TNG. And keep in mind, we know that this is all because TNG came out before Enterprise, so we understand this, you know. So that's why we think that this is all a different timeline. And so for Enterprise, and then going into Discovery, all the differences and variances there, going into them discovering the mirror universe prior to Kirk going there and TOS, we feel like that is also a grand enough variance that warrants that it is a separate timeline. And we feel like also that there are several points in Strange New Worlds that also leads to us to believe that it is a part of this. So we're saying that from First Contact, they loop all the way back to the first flight. And then everything we've seen from that first flight, like Enterprise, Disco, Strange New Worlds, is all a First Contact new timeline. There's just enough variances there. And as I said, they're just plot holes. We know this, because it's science fiction. But that is
so. What you're saying, basically, in another way of saying it would be, I don't want to stir up a hornet's nest because I have this problem in almost every Star Trek group that I talk to. But what you're really saying is, from TOS until the end of TNG, whenever this movie comes out, that's all canon.
Yeah, well, no, we're saying everything that happens from TOS all the way up through the movies, through Picard, Lower Decks, even possibly Prodigy. All of these are canon events. Anything that has happened back in time, like the events in the past of First Contact, Enterprise, Discovery, and Strange New Worlds.
And everything Star Trek is canon.
It's all canon, but in different timelines. I think
Yeah,
that's
the
kind of the
multiverse
argument we're
timeline.
making.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm with you. I'm with you.
So, and we cited different things. I mean, that we kind of went over, and we talked about the Khan thing, about the eugenics wars.
Yes. I
There
thought that
are
was done quite well, by the way.
Huh?
That was done quite well in Strange New Worlds.
Which one was the
correction of the timeline. Spoiler alert.
the correction of
Khan
the
was
timeline?
supposed to come
When
to
they-
power in the 90s, and the Romulan said that I've been working on this since the 1990s, and every time I do something, time corrects itself.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I mean, but that is a way that, as I said, that was, and we kind of went into the whole like that. Technically, that episode was its own timeline too, because even after
Exactly.
La'an goes back to the future, there is still another branching timeline that is going on where Khan is alive in the 20th or 21st century. So
Right.
instead of back in the 90s. So I mean, even with all of these things, it's like, there's also mentions in Enterprise about Zephram Cochrane warning about a cybernetic like race in one of his speeches. Like it
Exactly.
there are definitely things in Enterprise and Disco and Strange New Worlds that lead us to believe that this is technically a totally different timeline. Pike having insight into his upcoming demise.
Future. Yes.
Yeah, I mean that also leads us to believe that all of this is a part of a separate timeline, because we said, although we agree that Pike is accepted his fate is what they want us to believe, we would not be totally upset if they changed it for this timeline where he doesn't have the accident.
And see, that's the point exactly. That is the point exactly. And I had a really tough time when I saw Strange New Worlds, when I saw Discovery, because everything was so different. We've talked about this before. Everything was so different. When the Klingons show up on Discovery, what the heck am I looking at? And then something else happens on Strange New Worlds, and they look the way I expect them to look. So yes, absolutely. Once I accepted that these are different timelines, even within one particular show, then I can wrap my head around it a little bit better and go, you know what? It's just a show. I can live with it.
And I mean,
Isn't that what I said earlier, Cheeto? Exactly.
Yeah.
I wasn't watching, I swear.
But I mean, as we said, it's just we love breaking these things down and like digging into it, and we even sometimes prove ourselves wrong throughout these discussions. I mean, like
you get to talking an idea out and bouncing ideas off other people, and you come down that line of thinking you've never came to before just by yourself, and moments.
Right. Well, if you think about it, totally, you put it into perspective. TOS had a particular timeline. Okay, everybody knew it. We grew up with it, and you go, well, Khan, he was a big guy in the 1990s, and they left Earth. Didn't you hear him talk to Chekhov? You didn't tell your captain the story of when we left Earth in the 1990s and blah blah blah. I'm like, hello. I mean, it's canon. He left in the 1990s. Why aren't we talking about that now? Well, because we don't remember the eugenics war in our timeline in reality. Okay, so something has to happen to retrocon it to whatever's going on in today's story. And it's the same with Zephram Cochrane. He wasn't even from Earth.
Originally, you are correct. In TOS, he was not. Yeah, you are correct.
So, I mean, in TOS, he wasn't even from Earth. So the fact that he created warp drive and it was on Earth, that was fine. But the fact that he's from Earth and he lived in Dakota, that's different. It's a different timeline.
Yeah. And I mean,
and as I said, just go with the flow.
Yeah. And that's, as I said, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a show, and we're just, nerds digging apart our fan theories and headcanon and all these other things. And so it's just fun to kind of do. Jim Landscape says, "Hail Harry Harris."
Hey, buddy.
The TLD says Star Trek Temporal Agents 2026 will cover all of these timelines. It's a hello of a show. I don't know.
Could be a fan film.
Maybe. Could be.
It sounds like a good title for a fan film. If it's not, make one.
Yeah, right. Temporal Agents, 2026. New sorry remastered video coming 2024. I'm guessing that's a video.
He's talking about a film that I was
Yeah.
in with in his group.
We
Okay.
reviewed
It's
that
been
one.
re-edited.
We reviewed
Yeah.
that one.
Oh yeah.
I think I said I was sorry I watched it.
A lot of stuff that doesn't need to be there is being cut out, and that's fine.
Daniel Van says it might just be
You make
easier
the
to talk
cut or you
about.
don't.
Yeah. Daniel Van says it might just be easier to talk about things with regards to a person's timeline. Travel to an alternate reality is just not true time travel. Timelines don't just disappear. And you're right. When they started, that's why we said about
Right.
the one episode of Strange New Worlds with Khan in the 2000s or whatever it was, like the 2020s. We said that timeline will continue after La'an goes back to her time. You know, it doesn't necessarily. It seems like they're crossing these. You know, they're not like when they time travel, they're crossing temporal barriers as well. Like they are going into different timelines rather than just, you know, because here's the thing is that if they were all if let's use the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the sacred time, let's say Star Trek's canon timeline is the sacred timeline. It is the one that is the straight and narrow. There are no branches. That would mean that anytime they went back in time to change something, it had already happened. And so, yeah,
Right.
so that's why they have to cross, you know, the universal temporal barriers, because in order for them to return to their own timeline, like they go back, they start a new timeline, and then they go back to the future in that same timeline, everything would be different. But in First Contact, they went back in time. They changed the past because obviously the Borg were back there and they destroyed the ship and everything. But then they went back to the canon future. So they had to have found a way to,
Right.
and whether they knew what they were doing or no, because basically they said they mimicked what the Borg did. I don't even think they exactly knew what they did. They're like, well, we made it like we were able to duplicate what the Borg, you know, temporal, whatever. So I don't even think they understood that they were traveling back across the multiverse. You know what I mean?
Where's Spock when you need him, right? I mean,
I know,
look
right?
at Star Trek 4. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I went back to San Francisco, did a little too much LDS. You know? Yeah, but when you wrote it, you did too much LDS.
I thought it was LSD.
It
is, but he made a
They
funny.
were trying to act cool and they
Oh,
did
yeah,
the
yeah.
letter wrong. Like trying to talk about something they had no idea about to look cool and fit in.
I thought you were talking about the TLD. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, that too.
So
No, when Spock met the cetacean scientist, Kirk was trying to make up for Spock's lack of clarity and being so different, and he said, "Oh, don't mind him. He did too much LDS at Berkeley in the '60s."
and I remember her I can't remember her name now, but I remember her
Me neither.
the look on her face. She's like, this,
Yeah,
you know,
you guys aren't from here.
yeah, like you guys are a little off. Okay. I mean, is there anything?
But when they returned, it was somehow they went back to canon time, and it's like everything's fine. What happened?
Yep. Daniel Van says Latter-day Saints. So the LDS is Latter-day Saints is what he's talking about.
Yes, but LSD backwards or dyslexically.
So, I mean, hey, as I said, Harry, we kind of, me and Mage kind of got all of our stuff out when we were talking earlier. I mean, is there anything else you want to bring up timeline wise? I mean, we can even talk about other timey-wimey things if you want. I mean, the only thing we really didn't touch on was the Hansons. We talked about it a little bit with Vance when he was here earlier.
That's a good one.
You know, about the Borg. You know, apparently they were following the Borg before the Borg were even encountered by Q. Encountered by the Enterprise and Q and all that. So
that was a little strange to me. I got a little confused, but I went with the story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's just Voyager being Voyager. You know, hey, we need a backstory for one of our people. Does it make sense? Nah, we'll just
that's
make it
okay.
happen. Yeah, it's okay.
Nobody will notice.
Yeah, that good old Voyager. Too bad Zam's not here to defend it to the grave.
Oh
my gosh, I
I
mean-
thought that's how we were booking the debate. Speaking of, I mean, we've got Debate-a-mania on Saturday.
Debate-a-mania is on Saturday. That is true. All the debates are recorded.
My wife just said, no kidding. She is so sick of me talking about it.
And actually, Harris, if you're interested, the Debate-a-mania this weekend, the main event of Debate-a-mania is going to be Mage versus Zam regarding whether Enterprise is good or not. And so I don't know if you're
kidding.
Yeah, that's the main event.
What's the question? What is the question?
Whether Enterprise is good or whether Enterprise is good or not.
Okay, in relation to Star Trek or in relation to all things in the universe?
Well,
Because
Star
they're
Trek.
both.
Trek.
The answer is yes.
Thank you. You should definitely come watch the debates. Everybody will be we're going to watch them, and then the people at the desk are going to commentate, and then everybody in the chat's going to vote on the winner based on who made the more persuasive argument.
Yeah. So the debates are already recorded.
They're in the can.
They're in the can, but we're going to play them live like we do you've seen our fan film reactions. So we're going to kind of play them like our fan film reactions where we're going to have commentators, and we're not going to really talk during the debates, but we're going to let the debates play out, and then we're going to put a live poll in the chat, and then the people in the chat get to vote who wins the debate. It's not determined. It's just they make their best argument, and then we cut it off and we say, okay, now the live audience gets to choose. So we have there's the Borg versus the Empire is one of the arguments between two people.
Okay. Which empire are we talking here?
The Galactic Empire from Star Wars versus the Borg.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Okay.
Obviously the Enterprise one, Green Goblin versus the Joker. So this kind of spans all of nerddom. So, the Never-Ending Story, whether it's a good or a bad movie,
it never ends. I can tell you that.
There's other ones.
Attitude era versus ruthless aggression. So I mean, we've got everything from sports entertainment to Trek to Star Wars is included here. So it's just going to run the gamut, just like everything else we do here at Nerdtube. We talk about so much varied stuff.
Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, it's at 2:00. I'm going to throw links in the chats that we're all a part of. So
good deal.
And all you have to do is watch. I mean, as I said, you don't even have to participate. The only people that are actually going to be live are the commentators. Everything else is going to be just, people in the chat, having a good time and just watching the debates and, talking trash to one another during the match. It's going to be.
You think it's just the people at the desk? You think?
Well, okay. I mean, maybe
Mage
is going to run in on special commentary.
I'm looking how to hack the signal. I'm gonna jump in. Mage O'Rage will take over your feed on Saturday at 2 p.m.
Eastern time.
Exactly. On Nerdtube, the best channel you've sort of kind of maybe heard of.
That's right. Harry, do you have anything else to add? I mean, we are going to wrap it up. We were going to run this for about an hour. We greatly appreciate you being here. Loved having you here to help cap things off.
Sorry, I was so late.
No.
No worries. Thanks for joining us.
No worries. We loved getting your opinion on this stuff, and even at the end, it made it a little. As I said, we had Vance Major in the beginning. He was with us for a little bit, and we kind of got chatting a bit, and then we kind of ran through our gamut of the theory. And then it was good to just have kind of your opinions to kind of cap us off. It kind of, it's kind of like an opening bout and then a main event type feel.
I always enjoy getting the perspective of the classic Trekkers, because they have such a different point of view and perspective about it all.
He's not a classic Trekker. He said he liked Enterprise. That's not a classic Trekker.
I do like Enterprise. But he knows what I mean. Yeah,
no,
I know
Harry's one of the good
ones.
Harry's one of the good ones.
To me, up until Discovery started, in my head, canon was whatever they showed that was Star Trek, except for the JJ films. Okay, so in 2005, that was it. Enterprise went off. That was all. That was the end of the canon. We're done. And then JJ came out with his stuff, and
nobody cares about that.
I was yelling at the screen the whole time I was trying to watch the first 15 minutes. So I've never finished those movies. I can't watch them. They're not watchable to me. Everything's too different.
Well, I mean, the lens flares will affect your vision for at least 2 hours after you watch it.
Yeah, I was about to say it's an
not
Apple
just
store
the
with lens
story.
flares.
Yeah, it's not just the story. I mean, the comic book version was okay. I just thought that the art was weird because the ships were so different and everything. The costumes were okay. I don't love them, but they're okay. The props were pretty good. But I mean but it's a whole totally different timeline. It's somebody's born, Kirk's birthday is not even the same date. What the heck? It's different.
So I think that was the whole
timeline.
point.
Yeah,
I think that was the whole point of the Kelvin universe I mean, they destroyed Vulcan in it, for criminy sake. Like,
right.
I really feel like that, that it absolutely is a different, and I'm glad they established, but that's the thing. The Kelvin timeline at least had the balls to say, no, this is a different timeline. This is something completely different. You can either, and that's why it's like with the Kelvin timeline, we can say, no, that's over there. We don't really care about it. We don't want to see it. We don't care. Like, I don't mind the JJ movies, but I see where you say everything is so different. I don't like it. And that's okay. Right. I think that it's an atrocious, I think the aesthetics of the Enterprise are atrocious. Like, the engineering is a brewery. Really? Yep. How lazy is that?
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, they're like, yeah, we got this beer.
They give free samples of the antimatter.
Yeah, right?
Like, they're 3 ounces and you can only have 6 of them. You have to have the tickets.
Just a couple comments really quick before we wrap up. Jim Landscape says Jillian Taylor, the lady on Star Trek 4. Thank you very much. That's right.
Yes.
Jim. Jim also says he loves JJ Trek. That does not surprise me.
Of course you do.
That tracks.
Roy says joined late. Good job, guys. At least in this timeline.
Oh,
yeah. In the other timeline, I didn't make it. Sorry.
Well, that's why this is the best timeline, because you made it.
There you go.
Daniel Vance says cheers. Jim says hey. Daniel Vance says James R. Kirk resides in the prime timeline. James T is an imposter. You are correct. He's a changeling.
No, the R was a joke between Mitchell and Kirk. That's the whole point. When Mitchell made the tombstone, he did it on purpose.
He's like, I don't like the name Tiberius. I'm going to name you James Robert Kirk.
Yeah.
So
Roy Kirk. You get it?
Yeah, Roy Kirk. There
Roy
we go.
James Kirk. James
Roy Kirk.
So, all right, everyone. Well, thank you very much, Harry. Thank you very much for joining us here. It was great catching up with you. And
guys.
I mean, as I said, when there's no Trek on, I am going to try to keep these highly illogical podcasts going. I think we've got about a 2-week break. Well, so I think next week we're on break, and then I think Lower Deck starts the following week after that.
The 7th.
Yeah, so we have next week is the 31st. So who knows what we're going to talk about next week? Maybe I'll talk about I'll bring up the why the Titan A should not have become the Enterprise G, because that is something that really
makes me mad.
That really boiled my boils.
Yep.
I don't like, so I that's another great conversation topic I would love to have with anyone willing to join with me. So, and then after that, we're back to Lower Decks reviews on the 7th. So Harry, Major Rage, thank you very much for joining me. I am, of course, here with Illogical. I forgot to show this off earlier. I'm with Illogical, Major Rage over there. So
I'm the logical one? Oh,
yeah,
snap.
you're the illogical one.
Oh man, that's a lot of pressure. It's tough being the brains of this outfit already. Now I have to be the logical one?
No, it says I'm with Illogical.
Oh, with illogical.
Yeah,
okay.
no, you get to be the illogical one. You get to be,
I just rage out.
Yeah.
There you go. So
anyway, yeah. So everyone, we will catch you next time. Please feel free to live long and prosper. We love you, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye.